I have one final question for you, Ambassador O'Brien, and it was since we have you here, we're obviously devoting extensive resources to Russia sanctions, as we should. But I wonder whether this comes at the expense of our ability to respond effectively in other regions. For example, despite horrific conflict in Ethiopia, where fighting has killed an estimated 500,000 people in Tigray alone, the administration has not sanctioned any Ethiopians for gross violations of human rights. Eritreans, but none Ethiopians. Clearly, there are Ethiopians who have been part of gross violations of human rights. Likewise, the administration has not sanctioned any senior security force officials in Sudan for the killing of more than 100 pro-democracy protesters since the October 2021 coup, or Sudanese known to be working with the Wagner Group to export Sudanese gold to Russia. So what needs to happen to ensure a proactive approach in these areas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And your attention to these areas is, I very much appreciate. I don't want to foreshadow what we're doing. I'd love to maybe come and we could have a discussion with some of my colleagues from the policy side. Part of the mandate that this committee shaped for my office is to ensure that sanctions are properly used as part of an effective policy. So I've spoken with Ambassador Hammer, and we're very focused also on the issues, and that's around the Horn and Ethiopia, Eritrea. But we're also very focused on the issues across the Sahel and from Sudan across to West Africa. And I think in that regard, it'd be great to have a conversation about where we see things moving. The influence of Russia is something that, well, how to put this? We're well aware of Wagner operations and Mr. Prigozhin advertising himself across the region, and that makes it a very high priority target. In addition, I think Sudan and the gold trade and other elements are very important to us. So maybe we can come and have a conversation in another venue for that.
Well, I'd be happy to have a conversation in another venue, but let me just say, I think one of our challenges in our sanctions policy, more broadly defined, is if you're committing human rights violations, as clearly it is happening in Tigray and in Ethiopia, if you're committing human rights violations in Sudan, and for that fact in other places of the world, and yet we don't sanction them when we have full knowledge of it, then what is the global message? What is the global message to other nefarious and authoritarian actors in the world about, well, they pick and choose when they want to do it? And I understand broader policy constructs and sanctions within that context, but I also think there is a gnawing question for those of us who are big advocates for human rights and democracy about the lack of our sanction policy when it is so clear and obvious that there are parties here that are clearly have blood on their hands, and yet, and it's not that we don't know who they are, we do, and we don't pursue them. I think that's a problematic set of circumstances as we deal in a broader policy construct, but certainly as it relates to these countries, because I have a feeling that as it relates particularly to Ethiopia, some of your colleagues have an aspiration, but it is not an aspiration that's being realized. In the interim, 500,000 people have been killed. So how long do you wait before the aspiration is realized until you use one of your tools of peaceful diplomacy? We only have a handful of them. And so at the end of the day, I welcome, and I will have my staff reach out to you, and you bring in whoever you want and in any setting you want. But I want to have a serious conversation about why we don't see action in some of these things. And someone's going to have to make the case to me that, in fact, it is better for our ultimate goals and to save the lives of people that we not pursue any sanctions than that we do. So I'm looking forward to that.
I appreciate the attention, and I agree with you. I think that's thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now,